Welcome, everybody. This is a very exciting event for us. It's a new series that we're starting called Liberating Leadership Updates. And I am very excited to be co-hosting this discussion with Marie Le Roux. And I think this is so interesting for us to start zooming out and seeing the bigger picture of why leadership development training doesn't work and what does.
That's it. So for those of you who haven't met Ian Hatton, he's also known as Morpheus, and he has influenced leaders from 107 countries around the world and counting across cultures and industries. He is the author of Lead Like Morpheus, Ian, this is your cue, and of Egg-Based Leadership, the Journal for Liberating Leaders. He's a keynote speaker and facilitator, and he's the founder of Totally Morpheus. In 2022, the Southern African Professional Speakers Association inducted him into its Hall of Fame for his conscious leadership work. So today, you will be experiencing Ian's authentic and heartfelt delivery. But it's not just heart, there's a lot of head in this because it draws on his vast experience as a leader and a trainer in the IT sector, the corporate world, and the professional and community organizations literally around the world. Members of his influential audiences have called his sessions life-changing, and today you may well experience the same thing. But here's the thing, 2 decades of global experience in the field of leadership development has left Ian with a lot of experience and also a lot of insights on what doesn't work. So today, Ian will be pulling back the curtain on why leadership development training doesn't work and what does. So if that is what you're looking for, you're in the right place. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Marie. And let me introduce Marie as our co-host and co-facilitator today. And let me just say that Marie Le Roux has lived many lives. Today, you will not hear how a genie saved her skin in the Arabian empty quarter desert, or how she got stranded on an island off the coast of Thailand, or how she spent a rainy night on a cliff overhanging the Indian Ocean. But you will get the benefit of the expertise and experience she gained in researching professional development with a top-ranking UK university and implementing these findings for organizations from Oman to Malaysia to New Zealand and now the world through the online medium. And here at Totally Morpheus, Marie is our communication lead responsible for our content, online programs, and the vanishing of our supplies of green tea and peanut butter. I'm not quite sure, but they just seem to disappear when Marie is around.
It's pure coincidence, of course. Thank you so much, Ian, and a very, very warm welcome to everybody who's just joined, everybody who's been with us since the start of our recording today, and everybody who is watching this recording afterwards. We'd love to make this a session where you can get optimum benefit from everything that we have to offer. And so to do that, with respect for your time, we're going to be having a little conversation between Ian and myself. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to add, please feel free to do that in the chat. Your comments, your insights, many of you are experts in leadership development, or you have leadership teams that you develop. So we believe this is very much a conversation. But in the interest of time, please do keep them in the chat for now. And we plan to have a little bit of time at the end, so there is a chance for you to chime in. And so with that, Ian, are we going to pull back the curtain?
Let's pull back the curtain. Why doesn't training work?
Well, you know, there is so much research on this, and I think everybody in the house today has had experiences where they've seen there was this great plan for leadership development, there was this great plan for training, there was this money spent, and we don't know what the results are. And I'm sure many of you have had experiences where it just didn't live up to expectation. And fortunately, research has our back, and it has been looking into the same question as well. There are 5 areas of research that we've tapped, and Ian, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these. So today, I'm here with my sharpened blades. I'm here to play devil's advocate on why does leadership development not work. And one of the very witty pieces that has been written about this was published by Harvard Business School in 2016 by Beer et al. And it was called The Great Training Robbery. It's not just the Great Train Robbery, this was the Great Training Robbery, and they said a lot of leadership development is nothing short of theft. Because what they said was, how do you know? Are the results reliable? How do you even measure what the results are? Firstly, in terms of employee behavior after training, and also in terms of profitability, because there are so many factors that have an influence on these things. And can you credit the leadership development training process? And if it's not happening, can you blame the leadership development training process? How can you actually bring those things together so you know what is happening? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that from your experience, Ian. But there's a little bit more to this. So there's that great training robbery idea. But now there's the idea of training stickability. And if you've ever been trained in your life and experienced that moment where you realize, wow, I've just come through training and I have this breakthrough. I'm walking on air. It's all happening. And I'm going to be using this. It's a little bit like Moses coming down from the mountain, and it can be a very rude awakening when we get back to the real world and try and implement. So a lot of the things that we learn in training don't stick. And again, here, there's research that says 10% of what we learn formally is what sticks. But only 10% of what we really remember comes from that experience. We need other experiences to help the training stick so we can remember it, so we can integrate it. And that includes our experiential learning. And they say this is roughly 70%. Now, these are not accurate numbers that we can measure pie charts in our brain, but around 70% is experiential, and another 20% can be social. And for those of us who love to learn from books, even we have to admit that we're probably likely to forget what we just read in a book until we've actually gone to have an experience or gone to interact with someone around it or just to implement it. So that's the training stickability. The other side has a really grim name. It's training decay, and some also call it training fade. And this is about how quickly we start to forget things. And Ian, you've had experiences around this where people leave the training room, they're so inspired, and the next year you come back and you're contracted under the requirements of the company, and they say, well, here's our training setup, train the people, give them the information. Next year you're coming back. You come back, you train the people who are managed by them, and what do they say?
What happens is that people come in the training and they really do learn. By the way, I should be really clear. It's not that they don't learn. They practice the skills. They reflect back. They ask good questions. So they get it. They get the concepts. They get the knowledge piece, and they practice the skills. We give them exercises and they practice the skills, and then. Yeah, a year later, I'm back, and they're team members who have also been promoted into leadership. And often these are fairly senior leaders, and their team members come on the training, and they say to me, did my manager come on this training? Because I don't think I saw any of this. And this was typically, I would say, between 80 and 90% of the respondents were going, gee, I didn't see a change. I've never heard this language before. I've never seen any of this. And then there was often about 5 or 10% who would come back and say, oh man, my manager's been leading me this way. It's been so fantastic. It's helped me. It's liberated me. And I'm coming on this course because I want to be as good as it as my manager is, as well as she did it. And I'm going to learn at a much deeper level. And that's exactly what happens. The questions those people ask versus the questions that the others ask, vastly, vastly different. So yeah, the issue of training decay, and it's not because they didn't get it, but it's probably more to do with mindsets, and we'll come back to that word quite a lot today, the word of mindsets, because that is what really changes. But I want to quickly go back to this idea of the training robbery, where it doesn't work when there's a lack of integration, and the training stickability, where we are talking about there isn't this reason almost to lead that way or to fully integrate it. And I'm going to combine the two with a single story. I worked with the leadership of a mine. This is many years ago. And they adopted the training, and they then wanted me to come back and do a more advanced training, which was about the team. So this was one-on-one leadership and then the team leadership. And so over a 3.5 year period, I was there regularly at this very remote location, doing their development on about 120 managers and supervisors. And at some point, what they decided to do is, my training typically was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so that I would arrive already on the Monday, and they started to draw me into their Monday afternoon executive committee meetings, their exco meetings. And they were talking about that this training concept that they believed in so passionately, it wasn't sticking. It wasn't actually producing the results that they were looking for. And so we strategized around, how do we increase the level of integration? In other words, how does everybody know that this is part of the strategy? And secondly, how do we make this so that it becomes a daily practice? And they came up with a genius idea. I was just facilitating the discussion, but they came up with a genius idea where they had a weekly leadership practice that every single leader, it was compulsory for them to do. It's quite common in the mining industry. It's called visible felt leadership. And what they did is they added into that procedure 2 very simple questions that were using the language of the model that they'd been taught. And they simply meant that every time as they were doing this visible felt leadership, they asked these 2 questions. And within a few months, the entire adoption had taken place. Everybody was using the language, everybody was applying the skills, and the atmosphere of the entire mine shifted and got elevated. It was one of the most dramatic changes I've ever seen. So this was probably about 2 years into the work I was doing, and by year 3, when I was finishing off the team development stuff, it was a completely different culture. In fact, the entire little town felt different, and it was because they found this key of integrating it with their strategy and integrating in their weekly practices.
So that's visible felt leadership.
Yep.
And just one practice, one concept
Mm-hmm.
from this training that gets integrated. So there's regular repetition. Because I think that's one of the missing links, is that there
Mm-hmm.
just isn't this follow up. And in that Great Training Robbery paper, they also speak about the silent killer. And that silent killer is exactly this problem of putting the leadership development and training here in one corner, segmented and siloed, and the rest of the organization is just carrying on the way it was, rather than integrating it into the plan, the strategy, and the culture. So that makes a massive difference. And that's visible felt leadership, right? FELT, because I know we have someone with us who has a deep love for the felt, or the wilds, the field, and that's also like out in the field, let it be felt and felt. So we've spoken about the Great Training Robbery, training stickability, and training decay. But then in came the great, like Mighty Mouse. Here I come to save the day with online learning. And we all have such high expectations for what you can do with online learning. And for many organizations, this seemed to be the big salvation. And then the numbers come back. And I'm sure many of us have been on either side of the online learning equation. And in the workplace, on average, research indicates that about 40% of employees who have to do online learning in the workplace actually finish the work. So that's purely online work, roughly 40% finish. Even though it's part of your job description and all of this, it just doesn't happen. And if you, like me, have a couple of online courses sitting there in your library that you still want to take, you don't have to feel all that guilty because the figures say as few as 1.5 of us complete the online courses that we start or that we undertake.
Sorry, just
And
say
this
that
goes
again.
1.5.
1.5% of us who take courses for ourselves actually complete them.
And the less you pay for them, or if they're free, the likelihood just goes down. Even if the course is expensive, I've seen individuals pay a lot of money for online programs and they still do not do their part. And why is that? You know, it's this mystery of human nature, but Ian, we're going to dive into what makes a difference there. Shall we talk about these online learning disappointments and what you've seen with them?
I think a lot of them are they people are looking for some sort of interaction as well. And yes, there are some wonderful things we can learn, but very often when it becomes a big schlep and I've got to go sit down and do an hour's thing and then my email comes in and then somebody needs me and you sort of almost have this approach of, well, I could do it later, and it just sort of keeps getting postponed or keeps getting interrupted. And I've seen a lot of that problem. So I think one of the things that's really important there is is to look at other ways of doing that. For example, microlearning, and we'll talk more about that a bit later on.
Yes, pure online learning in massive indigestible chunks just does not work. So there are ways to supplement that. But then it's all good and well to read about the numbers and the statistics and the research. There's no research quite like what you hear from real people. And real people have been telling you a lot of things, especially in recent years. So, what are the trends you see, Ian, of people saying, we are struggling with leadership development, your clients, your community, your industry?
I think by far the obvious one is return on investment. So, yes, we've got, is it self directed? Is it discussion based? Is it, reading books? What are all these mechanisms? And very often different ones of those work for different people. But the real overall issue is how do we take this very costly thing of, for example, classroom training or big online courses, and how do we measure a return on investment? And that is one of the big things. And I've even seen, with some clients where they've invested an incredible amount of money. In fact, I'm not going to mention names, but there's a very well known corporate across Africa and the Middle East. And after 10 years and millions and millions and millions of dollars spent, overall, they saw almost no change. And it's like, well, how do you get this return? And the testimonies of the people that I'd been working with were, man, this changed my life. It changed the way I am socially. It changed the way I parent. It changed the way I am a better husband or a better wife. But actually, the business kind of overrode how, because the culture of the business was in opposition to what we were learning. And so I benefited tremendously. And in fact, I've heard from people who said, well, I eventually resigned from that organization and went and implemented that somewhere else. So somebody else got the return on the investment, not the actual person paying, because of many multiple different reasons. But one of them is, how do you even make it measurable? How do you even measure whether this year's results are in any way linked to the actual investments that were made in leadership development?
That's amazing. And I think there's once again that echo of the silent killer because the training rolls out, but again, it just doesn't infiltrate. It's just not contagious. And making that training or that leadership development process really contagious and passing it on might be one of the keys that we're looking for here. And again, we'll be coming back to these conclusions that you've drawn over time from what doesn't work and therefore what does and your results with what does. So a lot of those things are the case against leadership development.
Yeah.
And yet, leadership is a problem that is crying out for help. at the moment. The world needs it at every level. We see the need for stronger, better, more confident, more authentic, more conscious leadership. And one of the places that holds great authority that has made a comment on this is the Gallup organization. So the Gallup State of the Global Workplace report in 2025, the most recent one, actually said that here are all these issues in the global workplace: poor employee engagement, people are constantly job hunting. If they haven't quit, if you're lucky, they quit and they leave. If you're not so lucky, they quit quietly and you're still paying their salary and getting awful results. It's a really, really big dilemma. Well-being is a problem. And managers and leaders are also feeling the brunt of this. But they say if we want to turn this around, they have three recommendations. And all three recommendations point to leadership development. Because they say when you train managers, there is a ripple effect across the organization. Because now you get better employee engagement. You get better leadership, and these two go hand in hand because leaders are also employees, right? And then you get better performance. And over time, although it's difficult to track the return on investment, we can see that poor employee engagement leads to losses. Constant staff turnover leads to losses, poor leadership, poor performance. We do know that much. We have a kind of a negative ROI that we can see is happening. And they estimate the cost of this in billions per year, many billions per year, that we could turn around if leadership shifts. So this means better performance, better results on the people side and on the profit side. So that's Gallup. And Ian, I'm going to add a little bit more here from Deloitte, because Deloitte Consulting's person also said you get better value for each employee. 37% higher revenue per employee for the company over time, 9% increases in shareholder value, and you can have gains that they measure from 250% all the way to 450%. Because you have better productivity, better innovation, engagement, and succession pipelines, right? Having the next leader part of your company already. So you don't always have to import new talent to have a new leader. And also you have reduced employee turnover. So all those things can happen, but there is a condition, and that is that the programs need to have strong design and they need to have follow-up beyond the classroom over time. And then New Level Work in 2023 said there are significant returns on investment in leadership development, and they looked across industries across the world. So they said there always are benefits, again, depending on the quality of the training. And then you just spoke about how an individual might actually get the benefit of good leadership development because now suddenly they're a better community member and they are better at home, a better wife, a better husband, a better parent, a better person. They might even become a better entrepreneur because they're now done with the corporate world. They benefit from the training. The employer does not. And they also get financial gains, right? So a certified leader is 70% more likely to receive a promotion because of the qualification, and they're also likely to have higher lifetime earnings, as much as 37% higher. So there's a lot of benefit for that individual on a personal financial level. But is the company who's paying the bill getting the benefit of that? So those are all the case for. What do you have to say about this, Ian?
Well, I want to again just tell one story because it's just such a significant story of what has emerged with one of our clients over the last, well, I've been working with the client for nearly 3 years, but we've had a significant shift over the last 6 months. And what happened is that we designed a new way of learning for them. They were one of our guinea pigs. They were some of the first people to actually implement it. And we saw a bunch of different things, but one of them is we made it measurable The problem with revenue measurements, and I do believe in them, is they often point backwards, not forwards. So you have your financial year end, it maybe takes another 6 months or a year before that's all properly produced by the accountants, and they kind of tell you what happened in the past. But what if there was a forward looking measure? What if we could measure the actual quality of the leadership as it stands and the trend in the quality of the leadership? What if that was measurable and then see what then happens? And so with this particular client, they measured their state of leadership in their organization. And I'm going to embroider on this in a few minutes' time. But they then measured afterwards, and there would have been a significant shift after this last piece of training that we'd implemented with them, or this last approach. And the CEO, and it's a 31-year-old business now, he came to me at the end of last year and he said, well, the culture is shifting. The teachability of the leaders are now more open to learning than they were in the past. That has also shifted. And we measured a significant shift in their state of leadership in the organization. And he concluded with this. He said they've also just had their best financial results ever. And that, that is the kind of alignment that we're looking for, where there is a return that is a social or cultural return. There's something happening in the organization. People are happier. They're enjoying themselves more. They're more open to learning and growth. There is, obviously it's done through a model, and so there is kind of call it a technology or a model that is being used, and there is this bottom line benefit from it. And then just literally 2 weeks later, I was meeting with another leader of an organization. They asked us to help them in their annual sort of retreat to develop a strategy, and their big goal was sort of 18 months later, and they so appreciated the strategy that they came up with that they decided a year later to not do another strategy session, but rather to just keep implementing it until they hit their target date, which was going to be 6 months later, which was, I think, October last year, September, October last year. And when I met with him in December, he said to me, we just ran and implemented with everything that we'd learned from you and the assessment and ran with those results. And they, for the first time ever, totally blew away their target, which they'd never done before. And this was for a service organization within a big corporate. It was the biggest arm within the big corporate. And again, that's the kind of thing that we're starting to see. But I want to go back to that first company that I mentioned, the one that got their best financial results ever in 31 years of existing. And at the end of the learning process, we started getting emails. We sort of invite people when they're doing this particular process we'll talk about a little bit later. And we invite them in to give us a bit of feedback, tell us what you've learned. We started getting email after email after email of people saying, but this changed I'm involved in a church and it's completely changed the way I'm involved in the church, or I'm involved in some kind of a community thing, or my parenting has shifted, or even where somebody said, wow, I've realized that from what I've learned, my biggest gap now is emotional intelligence. How do I get that? And so I've had more feedback per capita in this engagement than I've ever had in anything that I've ever done in leadership development before. They are coming back and saying, this changed my life. And I'll tell you later on how much time it took. And they're saying it's changed way beyond, because it's a proper inner change. Because as much as John C. Maxwell says everything rises and falls on leadership, Ian C. Hatton says that leadership rises and falls on self-leadership. And these people had absorbed this into themselves, and it couldn't but impact every part of their lives, not just what they do at work.
It's really fascinating when you tell this story of the first company that worked with you for 3 years and then it accelerated over 6 months. And we're going to be sharing some of the keys around that as well, what made the difference, because there is something in there of the integration and giving everyone access and leveraging the technology, but not on its own, together with the power of experience and social interaction and doing it together. That's really fascinating. And Ian, one of the other keys that you found with them is that there's something that none of the research has really pointed out in the past because maybe it wasn't expressed in this language, and that you've identified and you found a way to measure, and that is the current leadership state. Would you like to tell us more about that?
So it's one of these things that shook me because I was slow in realizing what was going on. What happened was I did some work with a particular client, and we have this EG3 leadership assessment, which tells you whether a person is currently leading in a survivor state, a striver state, or a thriver state, and it's one of the, and obviously it's not never at the extreme, it's somewhere a combination of the three. But this particular organization had 69% of their leaders in a survivor state, including the CEO. And I then went on and debriefed that with them, and we talked about what they do with it, and it was wonderful. I then did a second workshop just a few days later, where I then wanted to teach them all sorts of skills that would, make them better leaders. And it's probably the most frustrating leadership development work I've ever done. Because I was, for example, putting them into discussion groups and asking them to come back with, discuss something and come back with a strategy for this or a strategy for that. And they came back with kindergarten stuff, if I'm really blunt about it. The kind of things that they came back with were just that they were nowhere near the potential that I knew was in their intelligence, because these are intelligent people, these are competent people, experienced people, but they couldn't grasp these more advanced ways of leading and the impact of that. We even gave them an assignment where we asked them to commit to a particular thing, and we got every single person to submit an email of what they're committing to. And probably 80% of the people had violated that commitment within a week of sending the email. It just didn't stick. It just wasn't sustainable. It was very much a case of, well, this is what I want to do, but actually I can't. That's really what we discovered. And what I realized immediately is that when leaders are in a survivor state or even a striver state, they are not ready to learn. We need to get them out of the state first. And when they're in a thriver state, they're ready to learn. So to come back to the client that had this incredible growth, their best results in 31 years, they had a very different experience. Actually, initially they had the same experience. We did an assessment. 18 months later, we redid the assessment with no intervening work really, and almost nothing had changed. There was one person who moved from survivor to thriver, and when we spoke to her, she just owned it. She just said, I want to be a thriver. I learned everything I could, and she just picked it up and ran with it herself. But nobody else shifted, including members of the EXCO. Nothing shifted. We then developed this new process of training, and they went through it. And we now have assessed them again. And the leadership team of 12, 10 of them are now in a thriver state, 2 of them still in a striver state, although some had moved from striver to thriver, none of them in a survivor state anymore. And now they're open to learn. Now they're open to grow. Now the CEO came to me, and this is just one of my best stories ever. He came to me in January and he said, okay, Ian, we want you to participate in this, to facilitate this kickoff session that we're doing. And this particular story, he said, he's beginning to think that what we next need to invest in, now that we've got the majority of the people in a thriver state, we need to develop team leadership. He thinks that might be the gap. And he even owned it and said he even thinks he doesn't get team leadership properly right. And he's never built that in the culture of the organization. And we then went and looked at the results of the EG3 leadership assessments and combined the results of all 12 leadership team members and discovered that their lowest score was team leadership, because that's one of the things we measure. And so it was so interesting. And so we're focusing now on that. But now they're ready. And in fact, even the members of the Exco who now also shifted, they're all thrivers at last. Even they said, yeah, this team leadership, we want to learn more. That was never their attitude before when they were in a survivor state. They're not open to learning. And so I think getting people into, a majority of people into a thriver state is almost a prerequisite. And when I then think back to a lot of the corporate work I've done over the past 20 years, I think the leaders who failed to implement were all leaders who were either in a survivor or striver state, because it was so evidential. You know, if they're in a striver state, their answer to everything is just try harder, work harder, but not, I'm really open to go through a learning journey myself. And in a survivor state, total overwhelm. You want me to learn more? I can't learn. I'm overwhelmed. I can't even get through my day. And so shifting the state, and we have fortunately developed processes for that, and we've now seen that they work, is actually crucial to open to learning, which we don't see in the research because maybe nobody else has got an assessment like this.
And that is incredible information to have. There's an additional detail to this, and that is that this assessment actually is available to the public free of charge. And the learning pathways for getting people to a thriver state are available free of charge for people who have taken the assessment. So if you are in an organization where you know your people are maybe not quite ready to benefit from leadership development, let them take the EG3 assessment, and that is how they can start. It will give them an immediate snapshot of where they're at. They get all of that free online within minutes, and it gives them access to what we call the egg liberation pathways, egg liberation for the survivor or the striver and even the thriver, so that they can develop as leaders. There's no cost for this. There's no strings attached, except that we need your email address to deliver it. And Ian is a big fan of Brené Brown, who says in the South, they say, you gotta dance with the one that brung ya. Some of you today were brung by one of your connections. So if somebody invited you to this meeting today, ask them to tell you more about the EG3 leadership assessment, and you'll have an opportunity to take advantage of that right away. If we're the ones that brung you, so if you arrive through Ian, totally Morpheus or myself, then you're welcome to contact us. There's a link to our contact form in the chat. But you're here not to hear why leadership development doesn't work, but to see, like, what do we do with this information? And Ian, based on your experience and on your expertise and everything that you've learned, that I've learned over the years with delivering this kind of information, we've come to essentially 5 limitations of existing leadership development. And then, because we're all about liberating leadership, we have 5 liberations. So let me throw the limitations and you tell us what the liberations are with Totally Morpheus. Will that be good? Outstanding. So the first limitation is ROI. How can we measure the results of leadership development?
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is to find out what the current state of leadership is. And I want to be really clear, the assessment does not measure personality or anything like that. It is really saying, currently, what is the state of leadership that you're in? And it's one of these things where we even put a dotted line between them, because it could change from day to day or week to week. But we want to get a snapshot of right now, what is the current state? Then help people through some development and then remeasure. And as one of my clients recently pointed out to me, and this was a heavy sort of data analytical person, he said, but Ian, this is a forward-looking measure. If we can see that there is a shift from this to this in the state of leadership, we know we're going to get the benefit in staff engagement, customer experience, and ultimately a market share, profitability, revenue, all of those measures as well. And so the other measures will follow, but they take a little bit longer typically. But the idea is, can we measure the state and can we keep tracking it? And as we say, we've got this one client where we've done 3 phases now. We did a phase, didn't do any work, did another phase, very little had changed, then did some interesting work, and everything changed. And so, the trend is there. And that particular client is now looking to buy a competitor out there doing so well. So it's very, very interesting how they've been developing. So yeah, we have a tool, and you need some kind of a tool that'll measure the current state of the leader before and after. Oh, and we do this at both a group level and an individual level. So we do not allow the group level to see the individual scores. What we do is we do a combined thing. So for example, if you can just picture a triangle, you can then see the dots of each person. Where are they? Are they in a survivor or striver or thriver state? And they got that overall picture that we can see this is the current state of leadership. In fact, in many ways, we could rephrase that and say this is the current capacity of leadership. Because if it's a survivor or a striver, then it's low capacity. If it's thriver, it's high capacity leadership. In other words, we can now handle change. We can now develop the culture. We can now make wise decisions, we can do fire prevention instead of firefighting. We can be more strategic. All of that comes out of the thriver state. So having that as a measure really does work. And we've got the track record now to start to show it.
There you go. So there is a tool to measure all these things. We spoke about so many things. Well, how do you make the leadership development contagious? And thriving leadership is by its very nature contagious in the very, very best way. So there's our first question, ROI, our first limitation. Second limitation, how does this connect to our overall strategy? This is to address the silent killer of disintegrated leadership development. How do you do that with your Totally Morpheus strategy, Ian?
So for me, it's a lot to do with the engagement with the senior leadership before we even try and do an intervention. I want to find out exactly what the problem areas are, what they're trying to address, and what is the level of buy-in of those leaders. And in fact, I've recently worked with a leader who was not ready to shift themselves. And they eventually, I said, look, I actually can't work with you until you are ready to shift yourself. And because it would just be a waste of money, because we can do all sorts of work with your people, but if you are stuck in survivor mode and you're not ready to get out of survivor mode, I actually can't help you, and I can't help the organization, and we're actually just going to be wasting each other's time and money. So there is this really important thing of what are you really trying to achieve, and how open are you to investing in your own growth and your own development as well? And will it come from the senior leadership team? And this client that's now saying they want to grow their team leadership, their number one criteria is, can we get the core of the exco, the 4 people at the core of the exco, can we get them into a strong team? Can we encourage the leaders around them to also build this teaming thing? But if we don't get it right at the exco, we know it's not going to work through the rest, no matter how much training we do. And so we're getting that kind of buy-in. And so what I tend to do is ask all the difficult questions and say, if you could wave a magic wand, what do you want to get out of this? What 3 ways are there that we'll know you've achieved that? And then go back afterwards and say, this is the plan. Is this what, does this align? And are you prepared to lead the way? I can't lead on behalf of the exco. They have to lead the way. And that means buying into the solution themselves and prepared to go on the inner journey. And in some cases, that means looking in the mirror. And sometimes I've even given them mirrors to look into. So, yeah.
So the third limitation then is about this problem of training decay. What is your solution to prevent training decay with real stickiness in a holistic way?
So there are many parts to this that we can work on, and obviously the involvement of the leadership team and even building some of what they're being taught into the procedures and practices of the organization. Marcus Buckingham says this beautiful thing where he says we need to have symbolic and systematic actions that will reinforce it. And that's what that organization did, the mining one, is they implemented something systematically that actually was also symbolic because people kept getting these questions. And so how do we make sure that everybody gets it? Oh, they're actually serious about this. They actually want us to lead this way. They're going to reward it. So one of my favorite stories when I worked at Microsoft very long time ago was they suddenly got aware of this thing of wellness. Yeah, we need more wellness. We need to have more well-being. We need to make sure that we have a balanced life and all this kind of thing. And the monthly staff meeting always gave an award to somebody who had worked all weekend, worked all night, violated their own wellness, sacrificed their family, all this kind of thing. And eventually somebody put their hand up and said, "Excuse me, can you not see there's a bit of a contradiction here?" The symbolic thing contradicted what you were actually trying to say, and then they changed it. So that was quite an interesting kind of concept. And we need that kind of thing where there is reflection opportunities, community interaction, people discussing it. That client where I told you, they kept sending me emails. One of the guys kept sending me an email where he said, "Well, I discussed this with my colleague, and this is what he thought, and this is what I thought, and this is what happened." And the two of them, when I saw their results, they were right at the top of the Thriver scale. So a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation. And this is what I'm also hearing back, is that this language that we use for Survivor, Striver, Thriver and the various components of the egg has become present around the coffee machine, around the water cooler, in the meetings. Somebody says, "Oh, I'm so frustrated with this person." And you say, "Well, what state of leadership are they in?" Or, so the questions start to come up, and it starts to become part of the practical application and the iterations.
Yeah, it's all about living it and not just sticking it up on the wall or in a folder. So the last two limitations actually respond to two parts, because often online learning is seen as a way to save money, right? We can do the leadership development online. It will cost us less money. But then we heard the figures. 40% of people tend to finish what they have to do for work, and as few as 1.5% might end up finishing. And how do you even know, what is happening there? How can you keep track of it? And then on the other hand, we know that at least if you have people's live bodies in front of you, especially post-pandemic, at least they tend to pay attention, so we know we've got everybody in the room, but it costs so much money, and our people are so busy, and now they're all on different schedules. It's really hard to get everybody together. So how are you able to find a liberation for these two limitations of online learning not being accountable or not being finished, and live learning being so costly and so difficult to organize?
Yeah, and typically live learning is really, really costly. I mean, I know, for example, what we at Totally Morpheus charge a client for an in-person session versus maybe offline learning, or even a live workshop that we can run online, and it's much more scalable, is quite different. So we want to make sure there's a good return. So there's multiple answers to these questions, and I think they're really good. The first one is our primary learning mechanism has become what we call microlearning. Now, when I say microlearning, I mean micro. Literally 3 minutes a day for 15 days. That's it. Which, if you think about it, that's 45 minutes. And the video content there, by the way, is only 2 minutes a day. It's just, having a look at the whole process. We say allocate 3 minutes a day. And I guess if you wanted to journal or whatever, it could be a little bit longer. But we ask people, can they afford 3 minutes a day, and get them to commit up front to that. Is this in interest to them, and is it in interest to develop their careers and to develop their earning potential, and to start tie it back to some of those other statistics we've got where we can see that people who are certified leaders can get 37% on average higher earnings in their careers, or 70% more likely to be promoted, and so on. So we see that kind of thing. What we do is we combine it, though. And even when you look at the micro-learning, there is a video. But if they don't want to watch me, that's fine. They don't have to see my face. They can do the audio, maybe while they're on a treadmill, or while they're in the car, or whatever it might be. And there is a transcript. And what's amazing is how many people have said to me, "Well, for me, it was the audio that worked because I could do it while I was driving." And somebody else said, "Actually, I'm not that visual. I needed the transcript. It was easier for me and more effective to read the transcript." And somebody else said, "No, but they love the video. They're very, visual, and they want to be able to do that as well." So we combine all three of those, and people choose which parts of that they're actually using. And then we also introduced the concept of an actual discussion workshop. And one of the things that I've seen before, I was once contracted, and I hated it, to deliver a whole lot of training where they said to us, contractually, you must cover every single piece of content. And the result was there was no time for discussion whatsoever. The breakouts were minimal, and they had a change of heart because they realized they were getting a lot of feedback, negative feedback from their leaders and their managers. And they changed it around and they said, can you please reduce the content and have more discussion time in both breakouts and the classroom? And suddenly the ratings for the course went up considerably, and the implementation too. So discussion is very, very important. And I know for me personally, I learn by discussing. It's one of my primary learning styles. And so we build that as well. So we have workshops which are designed around minimal content, maximum interaction and practical application and implementation discussions and different voices from different parts of the businesses and that kind of thing. So there are live online sessions that are combined with the micro-learning. And there's a certification we developed as well. So that also comes into it. Yeah.
So that is, in other words, this micro-learning pathway for each specific. You spoke, for example, about the group that had a weakness in their teams area after developing into thriving leadership. Teams, very tiny micro-learning project. People can complete it in 15 days with a maximum of 15 minutes a day. But putting all of those together across 10 areas, we also have a comprehensive program that is the Essence-based leadership certification program. But for everybody who's here today, you've had an insight and you've had your own experiences in terms of why leadership development doesn't work. We've shared some of the things that we've found with you that do. And I believe that taking this information, those 5 limitations versus liberations with you, is already going to make a difference in your organization and in your leadership work. So that is really, really powerful stuff that you can use right away wherever you go. And if we can assist, maybe we've got a shortcut for you. So once again, dance for the one that brung you. If somebody invited you, do ask them more if there is something that can be of help for your leadership work, for your team. And if we are that person, well, you know where to find us. There's more information as well in the chat. So Ian, anything else to wrap up before we hand over to anybody who might still have comments or questions?
So TJ has asked a brilliant question in the chat. I'm going to answer that in a moment. I just want to say that our certification does also include the journaling that we have in the journal. So it's so multidimensional, and that's the thing, is to really work with that. So TJ's question is, so when the leaders do fully commit and the day-to-day activities happen and the teams don't or cannot commit, how do we change it? So I really think that what we need to understand is exactly what's going on. And one of the dynamics, for example, when a lot of leaders are in survivor mode, is a lack of boundaries. They don't understand boundaries. They don't have boundaries. And so our model that we spoke about, these 5 workshops that we have a workshop on each mindsets. How do we develop and shift mindsets? How do we get the kind of clarity and the boundaries in place? How do we leverage people's genius? And maybe they're in the wrong role, or maybe there isn't a role for them. The wisdom, which is the values match and all of that kind of thing, and then the abilities. And so it's very comprehensive how we approach it. And when leaders are fully embracing all of those and ensuring that there is clarity, ensuring that we've got the right people on the bus. You know, it's quite a tough thing, but actually even in South African law, where it can be quite tricky, and we know this is going out globally, but it can be very, very tricky to for example, get rid of somebody who is not aligning with the values. The South African law now says, you know, if they really can't buy into what you're about, they don't belong there. And so we want to make sure we get the right people on the bus. And that is a mindsets thing, a wisdom thing, a clarity thing, a genius thing. There's so many facets to it. And so I truly believe that when we provide all of the leadership, thank you, Martin, for your comment, when we combine all of the leadership skills well and set the boundaries in place, because without boundaries it can't happen. There is no freedom without boundaries. It's like trying to play a game of tennis without a net and without lines and without an umpire. The only way that a tennis player can bring their full artistry, or a football player, a Lionel Messi, or whoever can bring their full artistry, is within the framework of a referee and goals and lines on the field, and so that becomes really, really critical that is in place in every single possible way. And TJ, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I'm very happy to do another session with you to go into a little bit more detail. But I think that clarity and boundaries is one of the most important things, and then we can work on genius and mindsets and various other things.
Mm, mm,
Cool.
yeah.
I see we're on time. We need to maybe wrap up.
Yes.
Bruce has to get his rubbish out.
Ah, yes, you're excused for garbage delivery, Bruce. Thank you so much to everybody who's been with us. You're welcome to stay on if you still have a moment, or if you need to run, you know where to find us. And we are incredibly appreciative of this community. We hope that this information is going to really arm and equip you with opportunities to deliver better leadership development, whether you do it with totally Morpheus or with a different facilitator, or you just go and implement this in your own learning, and even with your kids, with your people, with the people in your life. These principles apply, and we hope they're going to do magic for you.
Indeed. And Martin, thank you for your comment, and feel free to contact us. We'd love to have a chat.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I guess that is a wrap. If you'd like to stay on, we're going to end the recording now, so we are officially going off the record.